So good evening to all of you from India. I am Nitesh Jain from B Singular team. A warm welcome to all the attendees from India and overseas who have joined today's webinar. These webinars are brought to you by B Singular. And before we start with today's session, I would like to give you a short info on B Singular. B Singular is a unique platform that empowers the next generation to create a real and responsible impact in the world by working with the technologies of the future. Be Singular Social um, is uh, uh, is something which is a non-profit entity which has been launched by Be Singular in collaboration with the Banyan, leading daycare center chain. Our objective at Be Singular is to invest our resources to help foster exceptional educational experiences and learning for the families. These webinar series are our commitment in finding new approaches to education that help ignite the young minds, where they get to hear extremely accomplished people who share real life practical experiences to change the way we can approach things. We have lined up some renowned speakers who have agreed to share their knowledge in the variety of topics. I am pleased to introduce you today's speaker and my dear friend, Kaos Navigator, together with his colleague, Amanda Mana. Kaos is EVP of Uncommon Partners Lab at Singularity University. His company, Uncommon Partners, helps organizations around the world, from startups to the Fortune 50, achieve behavioral transformation using tools like strategic narrative, applied neurosciences, and experimental design. Kaos' talk today will focus on future narrative, which essentially sheds light on how an individual from a teenager to an adult or to a large company can deal with chaos with lesser degree of difficulty if they have the right skills. Over to you, buddy, for today's presentation, and now you can start your start your talk.
Hello, house party people. It's so great to be able to talk with you and to be able to spend some time with you this evening or morning. We're here in the US, and to talk about how to navigate chaos. So I have spent my career studying how people make decisions and how people and organizations can navigate change. And as a dad and as a husband, navigating these changes is really difficult. And the world is a complex place and has been forever. But it's become increasingly so. And now with this global pandemic, things have gotten exponentially more difficult to navigate, and it's harder and harder to understand what to do, especially when it comes to our families. Like, how do we understand this, and how do we navigate this? That is the crux of what we want to talk about today. And as I go through it, what I want to share and show is from a lens of what I've done for large companies, what Amanda and I have done for large companies. You can apply these same frameworks to yourself and to your families, specifically to your kids. So just a quick background while I think we're waiting to share our screen a little bit is my background is in applied neuroscience and behavioral science. And so I studied how people make decisions. And what I found is that the difference between making good decisions or making any decision is all around your personal narrative, your personal story. And that might sound really silly. That might sound, oh, of course, stories are great, but stories are just something for, watching a movie or reading a book. But story is really who we are fundamentally as people. When our kids are playing together or playing by themselves, they're always inventing stories. And what I saw when I was an academic was we would put these EEG headsets on people, and basically it reads what's going on the inside of their head, and we can see how their brain is reacting to certain stimuli. And what we could see in real time is that the only thing that really got to the core of who we are and would help us to change our decisions and make us do different things is through this uniquely human thing we call story. So I would ask, where do you fit into the story that you're in right now? Every great story, it doesn't matter if it's religious, fiction, what have you, it's all a story. And so the real idea, and what we want to take you through here today, is that by using some of these tools, which I'll explain in a second, you yourself, and you can lead your family and your kids. And for those children listening, you can do this exact same thing. We do it in my family as well, to help you be the hero of your own story. And to, yes, in every heroic tale, there are challenges and almost insurmountable things that happen. But the difference between the hero is that the hero is able to take those challenges, learn from that, and then use it to their benefit, and not just to the benefit of the hero, but to everyone around them. So that's what we want to take you through today. So I just want to check in. Are we not able to share the screen, guys? If you could put that on the chat, that'd be great. If not, I can try to just talk through it a little bit, and then you guys get to see my gorgeous face this morning. Anyways, I can just walk you through it and talk you through it. So I'm, like I said, I was an academic. I had all these wild ideas of how you could bring certain things together. And so, but I really needed to prove these things out. So I needed to, oh, there we go. Fantastic. Yeah, Amanda, if you could go to slide 13, that'd be fantastic. I don't know who's driving now, but that's great. So yeah, really the crux of this was all about taking ideas that were interesting academically and bring them to the real world. And so when I was, like I said, when I was an academic, I had discovered all of these things, that story was so powerful. But what I didn't see was that people were really using storytelling as a capability, like as a strategic function, in large organizations or even individually. So yeah, if you could just go to slide 13, that would be awesome. All right, so if we go back just a little bit to the low slide, that would be awesome. Yeah, so I left academia because I had these ideas that I wanted to prove out, and the only real way to prove them out is in the real world. So I left and went to Walmart first, but then was there for a couple of years, loved it. It was awesome, but then moved to this company in the US called Lowe's. Lowe's is a very large Fortune 40 home improvement company. So they sell home improvement supplies, so lumber and tools and plants and those kinds of things. And the reason why I went there is because I had these ideas again of how you could help a company do big things, or how you could help people do big things that they didn't think they could do. And at Lowe's, even though it's an amazing company, it's very, very traditional. No one would really think, oh, this home improvement store and creating disruptive innovation. That wasn't really how people thought of it. So that's why I went to go work there, and I was able to go there and then start what ended up being called the Lowe's Innovation Labs. And from there, we built some pretty incredible things. If we could go to the next slide. And can we go to the next slide? Thank you so much. And can you click one more ahead? There's a little snafu there. Oh, I'm sorry, go, there you go, perfect. So at this company, using these processes we're going to talk about in a second, we were able to create exosuits for our employees. So this is basically a suit that you wear, kind of like a lesser version of Iron Man, where it helps you to pick up things and it carries the weight of your torso basically all day. So it helps people to do their jobs in a better way. Create the largest 3D scanning company in the world. So that picture you see in the center of the chair and the side table, those are actually 3D images from a 3D scanning system that we had developed. We partnered with Google and Microsoft and many others to develop new hardware and software to help make VR and augmented reality a reality. And we use those inside of our stores. And that was before anybody else did that. We helped put a 3D printer in the International Space Station. It's still up there. And the first thing commercially manufactured is this wrench here. Commercially manufactured off of the planet is this wrench. And this is a real picture of that wrench from the vantage point of the International Space Station. We created the largest virtual reality training, and back a few years ago. We also were the first ones to help develop and to launch in-store autonomous robots, as you can see there in the bottom right. And I bring all this up to say, you know, this was all to prove out that anybody, if you use the right tools, that anyone can create anything that they want. And the reason why we're able to do those things is solely because we were using story and other things like that to be able to create this new reality and then to do something about it. So if we go to the next slide, and then we won a bunch of accolades, won a bunch of awards, and you know, we're #1 in a wide variety of things, and that's fantastic. But yeah, you go to the next one, Amanda, or whoever's driving it. So the real issue here is in any organization, the way that decisions are made, or supposedly the way decisions are made, isn't the most efficient. And that same thing happens in a family. So what you do is in any large organization or any organization at all, if you want to convince people to do something, you stand up and you create a PowerPoint presentation or something like that, and you deliver it and you try to convince them with facts and figures. The problem with that is that people aren't driven by facts and figures. We are driven by personal incentive and how it fits into our own personal narrative. Does this benefit us? Does it benefit the people that we care about? Do we care about this thing that we're talking about? And if it doesn't, then it doesn't change. And I was running into this problem over and over and over again, where people would tell me that I was doing a great job, giving a great presentation, but they didn't actually want to do or make any of the changes that I was suggesting in that presentation. And I think the same thing goes for our families too. Can we go to the next slide? So this is Google Trends. And if you haven't played with Google Trends, this might be how you spend the rest of your evening. So Google Trends, you can Google it, of course. So this is from Google. Google is the largest behavioral database on the planet. And why that is that people are actively typing in the things that they want and searching for in real time. And what Google Trends allows you to do is to trace that by region and by time. So you can type in any search keyword and you can see what the volume of that search keyword is by region. So this is a search term that spikes just after Christmas in the United States and then drops off precipitously about 2 weeks into January. And you're probably wondering what this search term is. But that search term, if we go to the next slide, is people searching for gym memberships. So after the holidays, people have ate too much, drank too much, gotten a little too fat, and really feel like this year, my New Year's resolution is to get in shape and lose some weight and, you know, all that good stuff. And so they type in gym membership. I'm going to get a gym membership this year and I'm going to get in shape. Now, when they're typing in gym membership, they're not trying to trick Google. What they really believe is that they're going to exercise that year. But very few actually do. I am one of those. These are my gym clothes. I travel, well, before the virus, I travel a lot in my work, and I bring my workout clothes pretty much everywhere I go, but I shamefully, very rarely do I actually bring them back dirty, because I usually end up hanging out with people at night or get too tired from travel. So my intention when I put my workout clothes in my bag to bring with me, I intend to work out on that trip, but then reality gets in the way. And because I had not framed my world in the way that I should have in order to get the result that I wanted. So my stated desire was to exercise. People that are typing in gym membership on Google after Christmas are wanting to exercise. They want to lose weight, but then the reality gets in the way. And this is the thing that happens to all of us, but specifically as we go into our families, we have so many goals for ourselves, for our spouses, for our children, and reality gets in the way. And we can minimize that. We can, once again, if we put our hero hat on, we can look at this in a different way. We can go to the next slide. So this is a study that was, the reason why I'm showing pictures of paper clips now was, there's one of my favorite studies is this study about paper clips. And what behavioral scientists did is they would give participants of this study, they would give them a problem to solve. So they would give people a problem to solve on a one-sided sheet of paper, and the problem was the solution to the problem required a thin piece of metal. So basically, if you took a paper clip and you unspooled it, it would require that. So, but if people were given the exact same task on the same sheet of paper with the paper clip unfurled, so here's a piece of paper, here's the paper clip unspooled, almost everyone could solve the problem. But if people were given the same task, but with a paper clip in regular paper clip form on the piece of paper, almost no one could solve it. So the only difference was that they could either see the potential or the possibility of that thing that was on their piece of paper, or they could not. And the reason why I bring that up is that we are surrounded by things that we could transform into other things. There are so many other ways that we could look at a paperclip, that we could look at ourselves, that we could look at our education, at the internet. We have so many tools at our disposal, but the thing that's probably the most important is our mindset. And there's been so much talk about mindfulness and mindset, and it's all important, but really going beyond just saying having a positive mindset. Like, what are the structures that allow us to do that? And if we could go to the next one, the next slide, it's really all about just managing this one thing. Our brains are set up fundamentally to manage fear. So your fear receptors in your brain, our brain is set up to find things it doesn't like and try to get you away from anything that scares you or you're uncertain about. That worked very well hundreds and thousands of years ago. If you saw someone you didn't know, probably danger. If you encountered something you hadn't seen before, probably danger. All of these things were good in, in way we were evolved in the way that we developed generations and generations ago. Those things don't work very well in this current reality in which we're living in, where we're constantly faced with new things and we're constantly having to come up with new solutions. So if you understand fundamentally that you are managing your own fear, and also you're managing the fear of other people around you, particularly in your family. But very few people are going to come to you and say, the reason why I'm acting like this is because I'm afraid. They might not even know themselves that that's the main reason that they're acting one way or the other. But almost without fail, any kind of a negative reaction is almost always from a fear of the unknown. And then if we could go to the next one. So almost all organizations act like this. So if you imagine any organization that does anything, and even in a family we do this, everyone assumes certain specialized roles. And what happens is if you have to make a change to one of these roles or one of the positions in the roles, the whole organization kind of can come undone. Anyone that's tried to make an organizational before at work or at any kind of organization knows that this is not an easy task. And the reason why is that we just are not very good at change. We don't really like change. Anyone that tells you that they do, they're just not telling the truth, or they don't really understand what the real question is, because people really don't like big disruptive change. We're just not set up for that. So if we understand that most organizations are set up to not change, and that's a good thing, but yet the world around us is changing so much, we can adapt our organization to be one, even our families, to be one that is adaptable to change. And that is really the thing. So that's about making us resilient and capable of doing these big things. Amanda, let's just go straight to 25, the one that says behavioral transformation on it. So I want to just jump ahead real quick. When I did my research when I was an academic and then put it into Amanda and I put it into practice at Lowe's and at other places since then, we really came up with three things which help us to transform our behavior and the behavior of others, either inside of organizations, large and small, or personally. And we also interviewed, so as Nitesh mentioned, I have a book that came out on Harvard Press. And the reason why I went with Harvard Press to publish the book is it's an academic press. And we wanted to have these ideas pressure tested. And we did that by interviewing CEOs and leaders of organizations, big and small, ones you've heard of like Jeff Bezos and others, but also many that you haven't heard of. And what we found is that these three principles, go back to the other slide, three principles that are really important. I'm sorry, go back to the other slide, the moving from little T to big tree. Thank you. That there's really three things here. And the first is you have to have a strategic narrative. And this is the most important. I talked about this before, narrative. What is your story? Who are you, and how do you fit into your own story? And a great example of strategic narrative is the famous moonshot speech by President John F. Kennedy. If you think about the time, the Russians were the United States and the Western world is in this pitted battle against the Soviets during the height of the Cold War. Horrible, crazy time. Again, dealing with massive change and uncertainty, right? At any moment, we could totally annihilate the world through nuclear war. So this is a pretty terrible, crazy time. So in the middle of this, the Russians have just completely humiliated the Americans and the West by putting the first satellite into space, Sputnik. The Americans are totally on their heels. The West is totally on their heels, and they don't know what to do. What does President Kennedy do? He comes out and he gives his famous moonshot speech, and he says, we will put a man on the moon and bring him back safely again by the end of the decade. So in that story, we have both the protagonist, the hero of the story, which would be the West. We have the antagonist, or the enemy, which would be the Soviets. We also have a very specific goal, putting a man on the earth, a man on the moon, and bringing him back safely again. And we also have a time horizon. What wasn't stated was how we would do that. And we had no idea how to make that happen. So no one in the world had ever done that before. Once again, the Russians had just put a tiny little satellite into orbit. That was considered a monumental achievement. And now we were saying we're going to take a whole crew of humans and put them on the moon and then bring them back again. That was just insane. But because he had laid out the strategic narrative, he had laid out very specifically, people were able to see what was possible and then orient themselves around it to get them to go there. Well, it's one thing to say it. The next thing is then having to do it. So then right away, the team underneath President Kennedy then had to start going through, how would we actually make this happen? So then comes the formation of NASA, then gets the money from the government to be able to make this happen. Then comes convincing all of these very impressive scientists to go out and build this thing and to work together in ways they've never worked together. And then after that, that's the breaking bottleneck. So you have to then lay out point by point, how would I actually get there? And what do I think will help me get there? And then how do I break through those things that are going to keep me from getting to my goal? Then the next step is you have to have new KPIs. So this is new key performance indicators, new ways of assessing if it's working or not working. If you're not assessing whether you're getting closer to your goal or further away, you'll never get there. So I think the best way to use new KPIs are just to focus on things that you can measure and that are not tied to your old measures of success. So if your old measure of success was around making money or doing something like that, try to use a different KPI and a different way of measuring that success. But again, all of this helps you move from little T transformation, so like little small successes, little small transformations, to big T transformations, which would be that big monumental success, like going to the moon that people want. And so even in my family, and then I'll let Amanda talk, even in my family, we do the same kind of thing. So we literally, so in our corporate life, we write stories. So we help organizations write their own narrative. So real stories with characters, conflict, and a narrative arc. And we've done that, and that's how we got to the things that we got to at Lowe's, by literally writing real stories with how these things could be in the near-term future, and then working backwards, just like President Kennedy did. And we do that in our own family. So what I do, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and my wife and I, we write our Christmas card. So we write the card we would send out to friends and family at the end of the year saying, these are the things we've accomplished this year, which is a pretty common thing over here. And so we write that for the year ahead. So in January of 2020, we write the card we'll send out in 2021. And so it's an easy exercise for my daughter, even as she was much younger, to be able to see how what she was doing and what mom was doing and what dad were doing, how we would all individually then ladder up to something bigger, which would be what the family was doing. And so there are so many different ways that you can apply this in your life, but I would say, and we'll get into this later, are you the hero in your own story? And if you were writing a story right now, this would be the part in the story that was really challenging for that hero or that heroine And then what would be the next thing that you would expect that hero or heroine to do? And then that allows you to be able to understand where you should put your time, where you can put your efforts, even in the midst of all of this terrible chaos and uncertainty. Amanda, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. So the good news is that leading confidently into our fear of the unknown is something that we can learn, and it's something that we can always be developing over time. Whether you are a youth or an adult, this is a never-ending process. So as Kyle was describing how an organization is typically set up, where you have your thing, your product or service that you bring to market, and so you build systems to do that efficiently. Teams within an organization or families usually have similar structures as well, because the same idea still applies. Once you find a way of doing something that is successful, we typically figure out ways to make that success happen over and over again. And so in an organization, this might mean that teams are built around products or functions. This happens in families too, where, maybe when I was growing up, there were certain things I would always do. There's certain things my brother would always do, or we would know that my dad was good at some things or my mom was good at another. And I'm sure that will happen in my family too. My daughter is 3, so we haven't quite gotten that far yet. But you get this, that you kind of get your thing and you do it over and over again. It makes it hard to change. And so when there's a lot of chaos and when the environment is so fluid, you have to think differently about how to get things done. And so we think it's important to focus on capabilities as opposed to a certain function or title. So in an organization, this might mean something more than working cross-functionally. This does not just mean put the product team and the sales team together. It actually means looking at the individual skills that they have and say, well, Amanda is really great at persisting through tough challenges, but Kyle is really great at being able to see clarity through a set of circumstances that are very ambiguous. And, we have Olivia, who's also really great at making them successful and pulling all that really together. And so you have to look at these individual characteristics that we all have and how those can be repurposed towards any kind of end destination based on what you're facing. And that really means diversity of background, thinking, and skills. Like true diversity of thought is the goal of how you want to build teams and how you want to support yourself within your family. So one of the things that we'd like you guys to think about now is, over the past few weeks, as our whole world is turned upside down, what capabilities have you realized that you need? Many of us are now finding that we're working at home, or we're homeschooling, or maybe we've lost our job and we're trying to figure out what we do next. But there's probably not a single person on the planet who has not had their life massively disrupted over the past few weeks and has to really think differently about, how do I get things done and what am I actually good at? Who do I need to help me get through this? So some of the skills and communication styles that we have studied in our lab are all about what does it take for teams to be successful in ambiguity. And so these are things that may show up as openness to change, really persistent teamwork, and the ability to execute a plan and deliver broad results. And so we have actually built a tool called the Kaos Navigator, which is an online survey that helps you assess where you fall as an individual on a spectrum that we think of as the chaos continuum. And we think of this as a continuum because we know that there are certain skills, there's actually 11 that I'll show you here in a minute that we assess within this tool, that fall on a spectrum of, being very, very comfortable in ambiguity and chaos, all the way to the other end where you really value clarity and structure. And plenty of people fall in the middle. And the important thing to understand about this continuum is that it's not a fixed state. People can move all in different places within it. And it's not that one is better than another. Actually, what we want to do is help you make sure that you have a balance of all these perspectives on your team, because if it's one that's too dominant, that's not good either. So it's not all about being this chaos pilot who might be the most comfortable in ambiguity, but if there are skills within the chaos pilot persona that anyone can help develop that make you more prepared for this kind of time that we live in right now. And so there's three three profiles that we've identified: that chaos pilot, the person who's really ready to lead through uncertainty; that chaos survivor, someone who's also very comfortable in uncertainty and really can be set in different directions to go execute and get things done; and that chaos counselor, who's really the team player who connects it all together. They're very dependable and they value clarity and structure. So there, as I mentioned, there are 11 skills that we test within this tool. You can see them here. So these are things like negative capability, openness to new ideas, risk tolerance, passion, execution, and delivery. Some of these are more things that you would probably expect in a tool around navigating chaos, such as openness to new ideas and leadership and collaboration. Some of them may not be so obvious, things like challenging the status quo, handling of criticism, and persistence and risk tolerance, because inevitably when you're leading through a time of uncertainty, there's going to be a lot of fear that you face, as Kyle described earlier, and you're probably going to take some bumps and bruises along the way if you're suggesting that people do things differently than they've done it before in order to get through this time. So the chaos pilots, as we mentioned, these are really those people who can see the chaos and be able to create structure and action out of it. They're really driven by their work and their passion, not by their job, which means they have the courage to take a few bumps and bruises along the way if they're finding that they're rubbing people the wrong way inside of their organization or in their family. With survivors, these are accelerator skill sets. So these are the people who can help those chaos pilots accelerate the mission that they're trying to put forward. So think about, what are your pilots good at and what are they missing? And then you start to identify, who do I need to put on the team? What do I need to develop in my team to make sure we have that balance to support the pilots? And then those counselors are the people who are really going to help you execute and scale your vision. So they can help smooth things over. They can help see, oh, this is how you should work with this person. They really like to be communicated with in this way. And they really value clarity in the vision. So that strategic narrative that Kyle described is really going to be that North Star for the team to move against. And that's really important to this individual. And so it all comes down to those future KPIs. If you want to improve these things, you have to measure and assess them. And no matter what, we're going to send you a link for the Kaos Navigator tool that everyone can take for free. But this is a great time, no matter what, to be thinking about these skills with your team or your family, and at a minimum, just having conversations about, what do you think your strengths and weaknesses are, and where would you like to improve or find other people to pull on your team? As I mentioned, we're going to send you a link to the Kaos Navigator tool. And then the next thing you do is have to envision that future, set that bold destination that you want to work towards. That's that strategic narrative that Kyle was describing. It is an action plan for the future, because none of us can predict exactly what's going to happen next. So what we can do is say, this is what we want to happen next, and start moving towards that direction. And so then no matter what happens, you're not caught flat-footed. You're already in motion, and the things that you've been working on can adapt and change. This ability to tell stories is how humans are wired to perceive information. So think about, what's your strategic narrative? And then the last thing is identifying and tracking those metrics that matter. So as Nitesh mentioned, we use applied neuroscience for a lot of this, so uncovering unstated reactions by using technology like EEG headset combined with artificial intelligence to really predict what behavior people might take. But experimental design is really an easy tool here that can be applied. The basic premise of a hypothesis, and then go out and test, is your hypothesis proved or disproved? That's something that can be applied in a lot of situations at no cost, and most people have had some experience with that. So where will your journey take you? I think, Kyle, let's think about a few examples of how this might show up for people who are in school, who are still thinking about what to do. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is really that strategic narrative piece. There's no more exciting time in your life to say, what am I working towards? Where do I want to go? And to actually write out that story, as Kyle was described, making yourself the protagonist, or maybe someone else is the protagonist in your story if your mission is about helping someone. But once you have created that story, maybe you even actually draw out some images to support it, or create a vision board with images that you find online, but very literally make that story real. Because then what you have is something that you can work backwards from. And you say, this is where I want to be in the next 2 years or 5 years or 6 months even. What's the first step that I have to take today? And how do I know what is my measure of success that I'm going to value to say if it's headed in the right direction or not? And that's one thing that really stands out to me. Kyle, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'd say thank you so much. Yeah, I think one of the most important thing is writing it down. So if you or just have a lot of thoughts in your head about things that you want to do, or you've had discussions, those are all important, and those are all important inputs. But if you don't write it down, it's not real. And then after you write it down, the next step is to share it with somebody that you trust and who you love. And that's why doing these kinds of things in families is so important, right? So if I have my own narrative of where I want to go, and my spouse has a different one, that can lead to conflict. So it's really important to be able to share those things with each other, and especially with our kids too, so that we're all tracking towards the same goals. You know, we can do incredible things as people and make incredible sacrifices if it's leading towards something that's bigger. And a sacrifice that leads to something bigger is something we call an investment. And so that's a big change, a change from sacrifice to investment. So if you just that small tweak, that small change, and thinking about it slightly differently can have a massive difference in how we perceive our environment and our life, and our perception really is our reality. And so these stories help us to both affect our current belief and reality, and then also the future one too. So I would just say, I would take 1 minute right now, and I would literally think about for a second, who am I in my own narrative? Are you the hero in your own story? Are you the friend in your own story? Are you even part of the story that you want to be a part of? And if you're not, I think this is the perfect opportunity to change. You know, so many great breakthroughs have happened during these times of strife as we look through the course of history. You know, Sir Isaac Newton, he was stuck in his house during an epidemic in London, and that's when, during that time, he had this focused time to be able to sit down and to codify a lot of the things he was working on. That's where he really codified calculus. He built all kinds of things that we all use throughout the world now, all because of an epidemic that was in his city, required him to be at home. And so again, you can take time, and yes, I'm not minimizing how difficult this is for everybody, especially as Amanda mentioned, if it's affected our employment, and I know it's difficult for children in particular, but we can use these times to grow closer together if it's tied into a story. If we look at this time as an investment into our future instead of a sacrifice. And so specifically there, and then for educational institutions, I mean, think about how important, again, this time is to be able to truly learn. So we do some interesting things as people, right? We build institutions for express purposes, but many times those institutions somehow exist to provide, to keep itself going rather than to serve the actual need to which it was created. So a good example of that for me is educational institutions. So school is a wonderful idea, a fantastic, enlightened, wonderful idea. But many times school can turn into drudgery. You know, the classic, I can't wait for school to be over. Well, that's really weird, because school should be a wonderful thing. School should not be school. Education should be the goal of school. And so in this time where we are at home, and clearly everyone on this call is connected to the internet, the largest knowledge database that's ever existed is at your fingertips. You have an endless source of knowledge and understanding and learning together during this special time. So again, looking at what you could do through education with an education lens as your focus could maybe change the way you look at this time. And I know that's what we've been doing in our family, and it's really been a huge benefit.